So today we got a question from a bro who wants to know, yo, Elliott, I'm married with children and I love my family, but along the way, I lost my identity. Great question, bro. But before we go, if you want to work one-on-one with old Uncle Yo, just click the link down below and we can dive into your situation and come up with real solutions just for you, dude. So today's question is, yo, Elliott, I've been married for over a decade and I feel I've lost myself in the relationship. I used to have passions, goals, and a sense of who I was, but now it feels like my entire life revolves around my wife and my kids. I love them, but I don't feel like my own man anymore. How do I reclaim my sense of identity without neglecting my family? So great question, man. And the very first thing that I want to address here is that a man's identity, masculine identity, is formed in comparison to or competition with other men. And I know this is crazy to hear in a world where they're like, no competition, no comparison, right? And that's a very feminine way to think about things, fellas. But we've been basically brainwashed by a feminized culture. So men walk around talking about no such thing as hierarchy, no such thing as comparing. Don't compare yourself to anybody. Competition is bad, right? And it's deep-seated. It's baked into our hearts because we learned that shit from watching, Nickelodeon and going to school and being raised by our mommies. But that's the real problem. That's one of the first attacks on masculinity is this chopping down of hierarchy, this hate of authority, and this idea that there should be no comparison and everybody's flat, equal, egalitarian, feminine, right? It's not inherently masculine. Hierarchy is inherently masculine. Level playing fields and egalitarianism is feminine. It's not good or bad. We need both, but once again, we live in a culture that denigrates masculinity. And hear me out. This is why this makes absolute sense. First of all, biologically, but really psychosocially, as a boy, we come from a woman. And as a woman, a girl, she comes from a woman also. We both come from a woman. And we both spend 9 months in utero feeling and hearing and experiencing the heartbeat of our mommy. And then when we come out, we're 100% with mommy. If she's breastfeeding us, she's caring for us for the first few years of our life, we are mama's boys. And whether you're female or you're male, your ego is formed by a female, by your mother, until there is around 3 or 4 years old, there's an ego split. Now, both male and females have ego splits because we realize, oh, I'm actually not my mother, right? The baby thinks its mother for a long time until it realizes, oh, there's a difference between me and my caretaker. But then there's a second split that happens only for men. And it is a split that says, oh, not only am I not my mother, but I'm also of a different order of being in a way. I am a boy. I have parts that my mommy doesn't have, right? We're not the same. And the only way that a man can form his brain in a masculine way is if he has another man that he can point and say, okay, that's what a man is. That's what my ego identity can be mirrored by. If I compare myself to, say, daddy, oh, okay, daddy is big, daddy's strong, daddy's smart, daddy's whatever, right? And so there's a hierarchy immediately right there in that new order of being. With mommy, you're still equal. That's why there was a study recently that showed that children behave more badly with their mothers because there's still sort of this equality between yourself and your mom. But when it comes to your dad, there is a hierarchy immediately. And if hierarchy reigns, which it does, whether you want to acknowledge it or not, dad's the leader of the family. And what does this all have to do with you and your identity? Men come to know ourselves. We form our identity in competition. Why do I say competition? Because competition is where we show up with everything we've got and fall into order. You watch it happen naturally with boys on the playing field, in the playground. They don't need to be taught this. They know right away who's the fastest. They know who's the strongest. They know who can do stuff. They know who's the smartest. They know right away, and whether they choose to have feelings about it or not, they acknowledge it. Yeah. There's the captain of the team, right? There's the guy that goes first. There's the alpha. And then there's a pecking order. There's hierarchy. I know that it doesn't sound sexy and people don't like it. It doesn't fit with modernism, but it's true. You now, like many of us, myself included, spend a lot of time with your wife, spend a lot of time with your children. If you're anything like me, I got 3 girls, so I'm constantly surrounded by women. And it's hard to maintain your sense of self, your masculine sense of self, if we're not in constant communication, comparison, and competition with other men. We lose our sense of identity in what Freud calls regression. And there's a fear there of regression, and that regression is always a regression into the mommy boy, a regression into the feminine aspect of us. Jung says that within every man there's a woman, right? And I think this has a lot to do with the fact that our base foundation sense of self comes from the woman. And if we don't have men to compare ourselves, men to compete with, men to see as hierarchy, either above or below us, not your value is better, or how can you say, we all have equal value in the eyes of God, but there are men that you're just better. They're just better. There are men that are better, and there are men that are not as good. And so when we don't have that, there's a regression into being like a bitch, a girl, right? Being like a mama's boy. And so we really need that. We really need that. And if you're spending all your time with your family and your wife, and you don't have something to strive for in comparison with other men, i.e., take a jiu-jitsu class, take a Muay Thai class, do some bodybuilding, do powerlifting. Me, I just signed up for another strongman show. Even if it's chess, right? Or just even if it's just stand-up comedy, like anything, some form of art. But I would advise you to keep it as physical as possible and as masculine, meaning like around a lot of men as possible. If you start getting into art and music and stuff, like, once again, you're gonna be in the trap of like a lot of women, and you're not gonna be able to form a masculine identity in a world full of women. It's impossible. We see it in terms of the epidemic of fatherless boys. They grow up not as fully men. They're not fully formed men until they get away from their mom and go off in the world. And what do? They go and they compete in business, or they go compete in sports, or they go compete in bodybuilding. They go and do something else where they can be around other men. And then they're like, okay, this is how men operate. Being a man doesn't come naturally. This is another thing that a lot of people don't take. They take it for granted. They're like, who needs to be taught how to be a man? Anybody with a penis. You need to be taught how to be a man, because otherwise, regression right back into being like mommy. That's why fathers are so important. Fathers teach boys how to be men, whether verbally, like here's how you do it, or just by his example, by being there. He can look and say, that's dad. And it's important to have a man that's better than you, that's stronger than you, that's taller than you, that's senior to you, right? These are important things, so we have something to strive for as well. This is a whole ball of wax of a conversation, but it's super important. I remember watching or reading a book about the Hunza tribe, the Hunzas, which is basically a ancient untouched tribe of people that still sort of live the way that they lived, hundreds of years ago, 300 years ago. I remember watching that and also seeing this in other documentaries and stuff, but the older men would play sports with the younger men. Like all the men got together and they would every weekend they would play this game of lacrosse, the ball that they would throw around, they'd spin it on a stick, and there was just this game that they had to play. They had to play a game. And all the women, they'll come and they cheer on the men, but the men, no matter how old they were always competing in this game. I think I even remember learning about the Spartan culture and the warrior cultures, and no matter how old the man was, he was still involved in the game of war. right? He was still involved in the battle somehow. Like, they needed all the men. And so the men even knew what they were, who they were compared to the other guys based on their age. Even the older guys, they were either mentoring the young men or they were supporting the young men. They were doing something to be a part of that war, that battle, that competition, that comparison, right? And everybody knows their place and is okay with their place, because throughout your life, your place is going to change. You're not going to compete with, the 20-year-olds if you're 50 years old and expect to have the same sort of experience, but you still know where you are. Meaning, like, now I'm an elder, now I bring wisdom, now I'm here to support you, now I'm a trainer, now I'm a coach, now I'm a mentor, right? But we need other men to do that. That's why I call it a mentor. You need mentors. Men need mentors. So, kind of blew my load already in telling you that, like, you got to go do some kind of competition. You got to go get around other men. And like I said, for me, that's a challenge too, because I live here, I'm work here, I'm not at the gym like I used to be, and I'm not around guys. And so I decided to do competitions. And when I get to go do competitions, it's cool, because then I can work towards it. I can show up and do my best, and there are going to be guys that are better than me. There are going to be guys that are stronger than me, and I can shake their hand and I can say, congratulations, I know my place, my identity in relationship to you, given this frame of strawman, right? And there are guys that I'm better than, right? And you know what happens at the end? We all come together and we have a good time together, and we maybe break bread together and we shake each other's hands, and it's a great time. And we, jujitsu guys, like, that's the big thing these days, like jujitsu. I don't like it. I have no interest in jujitsu, right? For my own weird reasons. But these guys, they beat the shit out of each other, and then, like, afterwards, they're best friends. That's how guys become friends. That's how guys have their identities. We got to beat each other up and compete with one another. That's it. So, yeah, man, it's baked deep into our DNA, into our psyche and our psychosocial way as a man. So you want to rekindle that identity, get out there and compete. Done.